What's up, everybody? Good morning, good day. Let's talk about Girl, Woman, Other by Bernadine Evaristo. I was super excited to read this novel here for a lot of reasons. I think, first off, the premise was super exciting to me. Evaristo's work won the Booker Prize, co won the Booker Prize, I guess, but won the Booker Prize in 2019. First black woman to win the Booker Prize, and I think this was a really interesting novel to get into. Let me show you what's going on here. Yeah, very complicated stuff in terms of the setup of this novel and everything that's going in here. Um, the novel itself has five different chapters and an epilogue. And you'll notice in amongst all my chicken scratch there that the novel itself has a huge polyphonic cast of characters. Each chapter focuses on three separate characters. So they're all laid out here, and 3, 6, 9, 12. So we have a total of 12 chapters before chapter 5, 12 sort of sub chapters before the after party in chapter 5. And the style here is also very unique and experimental, which I like quite a bit. It is this sort of free verse style that lacks a lot of punctuation, and there's it's a lot of almost like free verse poetry throughout it. It gave me a lot of echoes of commentary on social media and how we write on a in a space like social media. Um, and I think overall, this novel really is a deep dive into femininity, and it I think it approaches intersectionality in a big way, and does so very intentionally. And I think Evaristo has a lot of intentionality with really delving deep into womanhood and girlhood and coming of age and you know um, I guess the structures of femininity across ages as well, because we see characters who are younger coming of age, and we also see much older characters who are dealing with womanhood later in life. And I think what struck me most is the style right off the bat. I'm really a sucker for an experimental novel, and I was really excited to see just how Evaristo was playing with language on the page, and you see we've got all sorts of fun um, wordplay and such like this, where Evaristo lays things out very intentionally on the page, and is very intentional about doing that. Um, so I'm going to go through it in a little bit greater detail here, and sort of go part by part. I'll try not to do so many spoilers, but if you're here, you're here. So if I spoil it, I spoil it. You've been warned. And let's dig in. So for chapter 1 here, the three characters that we have in chapter 1 are Amma, Yaz, and Dominique. And the Amma is sort of the center here. I won't say that she's the central protagonist, because I don't think that there is one. Because this is a great polyphonic read. There's a ton of different characters sounding out their voices throughout the novel, and their perspectives are here in rich detail. But Amma is a playwright and famous in the UK theater scene. And the novel sort of gravitates around Amma, because Amma um, releases this, rather premieres this play called Last Amazon of Dahomey, and most of the characters are in some way connected to the premiere night. So the premiere night of the Last Amazon Dahomey is like the central point that attracts all the characters. That's sort of the gravitational pull that all the 12 different characters have, is in some way they relate back to that play being premiered in London. And Ama's chapter to me I thought was really interesting. I know Evaristo has a history with the theater, has authored quite a lot of plays, and has worked in um, different capacities with the theater, and that's something that's near and dear to me. I know she founded the Theater of Black Women. I think that's I gotta look at this here, which this was like in the 1980s. So Evaristo has a significant history with regards to theater in the UK, with regards to being a person of color in theater, and that's where Ama's at as well. Ama is um, basically premiering this play, The Last Amazon of Dahomey, um, and is sort of finally making it big. Is at a point in her life where she is finally making it big. Yaz, the second character in that first chapter, is her daughter, and we have some coming of age stuff here with Yaz, and with a couple other characters. I think Carol later on has some coming of age stuff, as well as I think you know there's a major twist in the epilogue that I think has sort of smacks to me a little coming of agey as well, but I'll get to that later. But Amma and Yaz are the sort of mother daughter dynamic, and Dominique, the third character in that chapter, is Amma's sort of like best friend, and maybe we might consider her like a platonic soulmate to Amma, possibly. Um, I want to be clear here, like each sub character has a section that's dedicated to them. So chapter one has Amma, Yaz, and Dominique, but you go into each character separately. So while they overlap, the Amma section is focused on Amma, follows her action. Then the Yaz section follows Yaz. The Dominique section follows Dominique. Um, and Amma serves as the introduction. That's, the last Amazon Dahomey is where most people are meeting, or in some way connected to. And that sort of serves as our introduction to the text. Yaz then begins to incorporate those further elements and perspectives and intersections of femininity and womanhood and girlhood as we go through. And Yaz has, a university student, a little bit of that coming of age vibe here. The tone in the Yaz section is really interesting. As a person who's much younger than Evaristo, I was like a little taken aback by the tone in there. It's really social media heavy, and there might be a little parody of social media tone in there. I would definitely be interested to hear your folks' comments about how you feel about the Yaz section. Um, then we get into Dominique, who is Amma's friend, and Dominique has a really interesting trajectory here. Dominique goes from the United Kingdom to the United States with a lover of hers to live in some lesbian communes in the United States, and I thought that chapter was really interesting. These first three chapters do serve as an interesting and provocative introduction to the rest of the text, because I think Amma serves as a really like successful point. She's doing very well. Yaz has a completely different generational view. And there's definitely some conflict there, and I think that I think Evaristo works at making sure that a variety of different generations are represented in the text. I think that is really clear throughout, is that we run into different characters at different age ranges, and that those characters provide different perspectives. That is really clear going from the Amma section, who is Yaz's mother, into Yaz. That sort of intergenerational shift in perspective is really clear. Dominique is interesting too. Dominique, I really thought was interesting. This narrative in these various communes in the United States. Dominique also introduces some of the more complicated themes here. Dominique deals with an abusive partner, And there is a fair amount of that. There are really complicated relationships here. There's sexual assault, and there is like domestic, like mental and emotional, as well as physical abuse in the novel as well. Dominique's section is interesting. That was a little complicated with how the commune is portrayed, and what Dominique's powerlessness is in certain moments versus what her power is in certain moments. Um, and I think Dominique, in that section that Dominique has, transitions into chapter two and Carol's section, which to my taste has the most brutal scene in the novel in it, somewhat well. So, with Amma and Yaz, everything is has been very difficult. It's been a long and difficult road for Amma, no doubt. But Dominique begins to encounter like significant issues with domestic abuse. Um, and when we transition into chapter two in Carol, chapter two has our three characters are Carol, Boomy, and Letitia. The Carol section, be forewarned, has a very brutal sexual assault in it, and I think that section is the flow from Dominique into that section. We are sort of primed to begin dealing with how these really terrible acts can intersect with what is a great life. Um, and I think chapter two, we also get distanced. We get a little bit of distance from the last Amazons of Dahomey and Amma herself. And So chapter one is really tightly knit. Yaz is Amma's daughter, Dominique is Amma's best friend and platonic soulmate, as it were. And then we sort of get at that further distance. We get further removed, but still connected to the play itself. Carol is another sort of coming of age perspective. Does include the sexual assault. For Carol, Carol becomes very successful later in life, and um, this is when I started to notice a little bit of parallels with another book that I'm going to comment on in just a second. But Carol's chapter is reminds me most of like the sort of successes but brutality that the characters experience in A Little Life. Um, I this is a really really popular novel, A Little Life, and Yadagihara, and you might find some similarities between the Carol section and some of the sections in A Little Life. Just seeing and how the really bad things happen, but you have a character who's still enormously successful. Carol's very successful in finance. And then we sort of look at Boomy and Letitia, two separate characters there in chapter two. And these are all tied up. Boomy is Carol's mother, and Letitia goes to school with Carol. And Boomy is an immigrant story. I really liked the Boomy chapter. I really liked the Letitia chapter as well. And these, once we start getting more and more removed, Carol is like a successful financier, so is going to the last Amazon of Dahomey because is wealthy, lives in London. And then when we get to Boomy and Letitia, we start to get further out. I really like how these stories begin to sort of get complicated, and it becomes less clear how we're relating back to the story the play taking place in London. And Boomy's perspective, I really did enjoy. I really did like Boomy. That felt really genuine. It felt like really good writing. And I think this is where a lot of, Bumi and Letitia were, for me, where a lot of really strong writing and characterization were. Bumi, especially, I thought the Bumi section and just her feelings about immigration, her feelings about Carol, her feelings about motherhood, um, were really, really beautiful to read and really interesting to read. And then Letitia as well. Letitia has, I think a lot of the characters, you know, to a certain extent, Amma has prestige. Amma is a playwright premiering a play in a very important house in London. That is a high level of prestige. Yaz, her daughter, obviously a lot of interconnected generational prestige there, um, and privilege, of course. Dominique, able to move to the United States, also in this theater scene with Amma, also sort of a level of privilege and prestige. Carol, high level financier, lots of financial privilege, lots of financial prestige. Boomy, has this just really self assured status in terms of how Boomy's thinking about her own life. So Letitia, we get a really interesting class thing where Letitia is working at this supermarket. And I really did enjoy the Letitia chapter and the way that, Letitia is framed and characterized here. Um, you know, Letitia talks about her own family's history and everything that's going on there. And I think that that's really good. I think another thing that would be really interesting to American readers here is probably how Letitia and Boomy and Carol and others talk about their immigration stories and their stories of diaspora, because this is set in the United Kingdom and it has a very different sort of setup to how folks' immigration stories and folks' experiences in diaspora are. It's very different from what folks might expect in the United States. Um, and with Letitia's chapter and her family and just how she talks about um, you know everything that's going on here, and being a mother and the complications of motherhood. I really did like it. Letitia, I think, connects in with some other characters who are really complicated. And those characters get down on Letitia. But I think, to my taste, I think that Letitia presents really fantastic characterization here. Boomy as well. I think this is where, in the novel you're really getting the multitude of perspectives and the sort of polyphonic characterization here of all these different voices having all these different perspectives and coming from all sorts of different angles and reflecting in all sorts of different complicated philosophical ways. Um, I think that is really interesting. Then we go to chapter 3, and let me get that in here for you guys. And chapter 3, this connects through with the teachers that Carol and Letitia have. Chapter 3 is about Shirley, Winsome, who is Shirley's mother, and Penelope. Shirley and Penelope are teachers at sort of a maybe down and out school, might be how we think. I don't know. I don't know much about the education system in the United Kingdom, but it seems like maybe an underfunded school or a school that is having some issues with regards to resources. But yeah, Shirley and Penelope are two teachers there, and Shirley, this is a tone that I think is gonna surprise a lot of people. Shirley, yeah, works at the Peckham School for Boys and Girls, and at first, the character of Shirley is enamored with the notion of vocational awe, which is this idea that there are some vocations like being a teacher or being a librarian, that are inherently good, and the people who do them are good because they do them. So they're so in awe of the vocation that they think, wow, I'm just really doing fantastic things for society. Shirley's perspective then gets skewed as Shirley is deeply embittered towards education. And really, there's some interesting tone here with teacher towards student tone. And I would say buckle up for that, because some of that is really interesting to me. Having been in the classroom, having been a professor before, hearing Shirley talk about students in the way that she did, I was taken aback. I was really, really, interested as to why Evaristo did this. And I think what may be done here in Evaristo's intention, if I had to speculate, might be, showing this other side of education where our teachers are, deeply burnt out, deeply, exploited by various systems. Um, it surely makes that very clear. That is evident in Shirley, as well as in Penelope's section here. Um, Overall, this was one of the first times in the novel where I was like absolutely taken out of it. And there's a point later in the novel where I was taken out completely, in the next section, in chapter 4. But here in chapter 3, Evaristo has a pretty sharp point when it comes to talking about how some educators feel, and I don't quite know the intention or message behind it. If you do, let me know in the comments what your thought on the Shirley section was, because I could see a couple of different things emerging here. I could see hey, our teachers are exploited and we need to treat them better sort of criticism. I could see the opposite of this, which is I could see folks taking from this, hey, our teachers are entitled and need to grow up. That's how deep some of the language goes here with regards to her students. And we do, Shirley does have a little bit more of that prestige again, a little bit of that higher status, being in the power dynamic of teacher versus student. And we definitely see where Letitia, for example, gets basically told that she's, no good, by some of these teachers. And seeing Shirley in that really entitled perspective is really, really quite provocative. And then we go into Winsome, who has another mother-daughter sort of relationship. Winsome is Shirley's mother, and Winsome is retired. Winsome is another sort of perspective that I think Americans might find this interesting, seeing Winsome in retirement. There's a line in Winsome's chapter where her and Shirley are talking, uh, and Shirley's sort of complaining about having to work 48 weeks out of the year. And I think Americans are really, I think, that is one of those, culture clash things that Americans might find really interesting. Having those 4 weeks off is certainly something. But that aside, Winsome is sort of living out retirement, and this is where we get more of these intergenerational things. I think you see that with Carol and Boomy. We have not only the mother-daughter trend here, but we also have the through line of intergenerational stuff. So, we go from Amma to Yaz, mother to daughter, generation to generation, Carol to Boomy. Switching it, we go Carol first, and then we go to the mother, Boomy. And then, yet again, Cheryl and Winsome. So we are delving deep into these different aspects of intergenerational discourse, as well as like overall discourse on femininity, motherhood, daughterhood, and girlhood that's going on here. Winsome's chapter surprised me a lot. There are a lot of surprises in this novel, a lot of things I did not expect. Winsome's chapter sees Winsome having an affair with Shirley's husband. And I was really, really taken aback and surprised by that. And it was almost given how Shirley's tone is in her section, it was almost cathartic, almost a little bit of comeuppance, um, but just a really surprising trajectory there. Um, and it was there's a lot of moral quandary. I think in chapters 3 and 4, but particularly in chapter 3, we're presented with a lot of ethical and moral issues going on here. Is it ethical? Is it moral for Shirley to be talking about her students in the way that she does? Maybe not. But can we fault somebody for being burnt out, for having a difficult time, for having difficulties? Also, maybe not. Is it? And then of course, we have this huge moral dilemma happening with regard to Winsome um, and Shirley's husband. Definitely a huge curveball that happens here, and just quite the surprise. And then this takes us to Penelope. And Penelope is another, maybe, definitely, most, I guess, everybody's a main character if nobody's a main character. If anybody's a main character, maybe it's Amma. But secondarily, Penelope um, comes into focus later. But Penelope's section presents her as um, our first sort of like white woman character who gets a section. And Penelope has a lot of issues with being adopted. Adoption is near and dear to me. That's an important issue to me. And there was a lot of tough language around adoption. And Penelope's perspective on adoption was really interesting, because she does, upon finding out that she was adopted, um, she basically starts referring to her parents as the people who used to be her parents. On 281, she says she heard the man she thought her father until a short while ago leave the house to play golf with his brother, no longer her uncle, as he did every Saturday afternoon. The woman who used to be her mother would still be sitting in front of the fire crocheting white booties for her youngest niece, Linda, no longer Penelope's baby cousin. And we do have a little bit of this coming of age stuff again here with regards to this, a little bit of that sort of teenage acting out. Um, but this sort of perspective on adoption is pretty tough, and a lot of people find out that they're adopted, and it's those people are still their parents, that's still their family, and a lot of people have that experience and don't necessarily act out in that particular way. So this started to bring me out of the narrative a little bit. I got back into it, but this was just because adoption is a personal issue for me. Um, that sort of snapped me out of it a little bit. Um, but Penelope is sort of a higher administrator above Shirley at the school and has more of this um, language that Shirley has about education. So we sort of had this arc, um, you know, in that chapter, in chapter 3, where we have Shirley talking about students, and that's pretty difficult. And then we have Winsome, who's just living her life, albeit having a pretty remarkable affair. And then we go back to Penelope, who again talks about those students. And Penelope is openly bigoted, does have a lot of bigotry, and expresses that here. Um, and I think that there's a big, a deep commentary about education in the United Kingdom that could be made here. I think that there's a lot of commentary that, if you were looking at this with a critical lens, maybe we could get pretty deep into that, with regards to like education and power dynamics and privileged perspectives and femininity and how is power exerted, and how those sort of perspectives interact with each other. I think this chapter is really provocative in that way. Going on to chapter 4. Let me grab that for you. Now, chapter 4 starts with the Megan Morgan chapter. You guys can probably see my notes in there, so this is going to be no surprise what I talk about here. This is the chapter I had a lot of difficulty with. And we talked a little bit in the 2666 video about how um, Bologna's characterization of women might be a major turnoff for some readers. And that might not be something that you're super excited about. And there is definitely something in this Megan Morgan chapter that is along those lines, albeit maybe a little bit more explicit, and coming from a different way. You know, there are different sort of situations here. Um, Megan Morgan is a non binary character who interacts with some trans folks. And Morgan is an influencer on social media, and there's a portion earlier in the novel where Yaz is commented as having um, followed um, Morgan on social media. And there is like commentary about Morgan becoming non-binary on page 328 of mine. Um, Morgan, no longer Megan, has self identified as gender free for 6 years now. They've learned to be cool with it when people don't use or understand their preferred pronouns. So this is Morgan is sort of the focus of this chapter, and Morgan is going to see the last Amazon of Dahomey. Um, and um, Morgan interacts with a trans person, a trans woman named BB. Um, and 325. This is before Megan, or before, excuse me, before Morgan, uh, I guess, has committed to being non-binary. And um, there's some stuff in here that really got me out of the text and really snapped me out of what was going on, and I wasn't sure what the commentary was here at all, and I had to do a little bit of reflecting. Um, yeah, on page 324 and 325, BB explained over Mocha that as tarting up in high heels, tight skirts, and wearing a thick layer of face paint is all about gender and not biological sex, she wears what she likes and feels comfortable doing so, although other trans females might think that being a woman is still all about adhering to a stereotyped version of womanhood, when clearly most women can't be arsed with it all. She gestured to the women walking around the station. Look at them. Megan felt rattled at BB in effect mansplaining. She, as a woman with male confidence, who went on to say that dressing like a woman means wearing every variety of clothing you can imagine, including baggies like these, she pulled at her blue jeans. You don't have to tell me, Megan said when she could get a word in edgeways, pointing at her own baggy jeans and outsized red and white check shirt, sleeves rolled up. Tats cost enough. Don't forget, I'm the expert here. Of course you are, BB exclaimed. Look at me telling you. You have to stop me from becoming one of those trans females who think they know more about being a woman than those who've lived their entire lives as one. And this snapped me out of it. This really, I was came into this novel thinking so much about different perspectives on womanhood, the fluidity of that, how complicated that is, and I was really surprised by this section. This whole idea that BB magically one day just goes from man to woman is such a reductive view of trans folks, and it is a turf ideology. Um, this is the, hey, why did you choose to be gay? Why did you choose to be trans? Why did you choose to be bi? Sort of thing. This is not how it works. And I was really taken aback by this. And I know that in the United Kingdom that there's a lot of difficulties, especially with writers, in regard to trans rights and trans representation. And this really snapped me out. I had to take a break from the novel just because this isn't what I expected. With a novel like 2666, we're expecting toxic masculinity. We're expecting mistreatment, murder, violence, domestic violence, assault. And I wasn't necessarily expecting something like this from Evaristo. And I was a little surprised to see it and a little disappointed to see this. I think this could have been edited out, and this section could have been resurrected and been totally great. And especially because the novel is so rich and so polyphonic, has so many different voices. I think it was really good that Evaristo wants to include, a non-binary character. I think it's good that Evaristo wants to include a trans character, and there was a lot of rich possibility here. But the inclusion of this accusation of mansplaining and how who gets to constitute what was really, really surprising to me. And it was really rigid in its view of womanhood and femininity. And I was surprised by that as well. And this is an ongoing issue with the discourse, of course. There's no doubt about it. And like I said, I know other writers in the United Kingdom, famously J.K. Rowling, have significant issues in handling, how complicated this is. So it's definitely one of those things where I was really, really, really surprised to see that here. Um, let me know how you folks feel about that section down below. That's probably inviting inviting a little bit of pain to myself, and engaging that discourse, but, um, you know, we'll get there. We'll get through it together. The two other characters in here in section 3 are Hattie and Grace. Hattie has another sort of older perspective, um, and Hattie's chapter and Grace's chapter. When I got back to the novel, I did really appreciate both of them. Hattie and Grace, I think, are some of the strongest writing here, and Grace, I think, perhaps the strongest of all the sections. Um, Grace, does something here that I think is really important, which is talks about a lot of colonial history. And for the first time, we actually have on 372, we have a year in the novel. Let me see where this is. 1895. There we go. And Grace is, talking about, deals with different aspects of the colonial perspective. And the year reminded me that this novel, has something else in common with A Little Life, which is that it has a lot more historical content. A Little Life, this may as well be ahistorical. There's no years. There's not even commenting on presidents. I don't even know if they mention President Reagan in here. And in the midst of the AIDS crisis, that's a Little Life is a thing for a different time. But one thing that was surprising to me throughout all of this, and I was so happy that Grace came in here, is that the timeline of a lot of these sections and a lot of the work here is confusing. It's really not transparent, and it's difficult for the reader to get sort of the historical context. And I think that there's a little bit of a popular rebellion against that right now amongst writers popularly. And I just want to plead with you, if you're out there writing your novel, give us some more historical context. By the time we got to Grace and they actually started, my receipt, started, and Evaristo started really contextualizing historically, I was so relieved because it gives me so much rich detail that I can dig into here. Abyssinia, nobody calls Ethiopia that, right? That is a far gone thing. That's great context. 1895, great context. All of a sudden I'm situated. All of a sudden I understand what's going on. Firmly rooted in the colonial history and project that's going on here. And the rest of the novel, I think, could have used that. There are references to Thatcher and other sort of place markers that situate the narrative in time. But for me, and the way that I read, I really love that rich detail. I love that historical detail. That was one of my biggest issues with A Little Life was, there's that historical detail is vacant. It's absent. And luckily, there was some of that here. Um, and Grace is our last character presented before chapter 5, which is the after party. And the after party where after the premiere of Last Amazon Dahomey, um, you see all the different characters, Carol, you see Morgan and various characters, Yaz, all interacting, and Dominique and Amma are interacting and having a good time, and it's sort of an all's well that ends well situation. It's this big gathering of all the characters and tying everything together. Um, we don't get any scenes or anything from Last Amazon of Dahomey. I would have loved that. I would have loved the complete text of give me 120 pages of the text of the play. I would have read it. I would have loved it. Um, but we don't get that. We do get the after party, and then we get the epilogue. The epilogue is a huge twist, which is about Penelope. And I'll leave it at that. But basically, it's a comeuppance moment for Penelope in that epilogue as she finds out some very important stuff about her life. Um, and overall, I think that there are so many colliding and intersecting voices here that I think that this is a really compelling read for most people. I think you let me know if this is going to be your next read in the comments. I'd definitely be very interested in it. But there's a lot going on here. I do think the Megan Morgan chapter, it's tough. That was tough for me to get through. I'm not going to pretend that I'm super happy to see anything resembling sort of turf ideology in this novel. But that aside, there's still a lot going on here that I think merits a significant read. Um, a couple of works that I might think of right off the bat that might be relevant here. First, I think would be Marie Lugones' Pilgrimages and Peregrinajes, Theorizing Coalition Against Multiple Oppressions. This is one of my favorite works of intersectional feminism, and I think it's just really just super duper important work here, what Lugones was doing. I think overall, if you're interested in having a really detailed read here, I think this chapter on playfulness and world travel and loving perception, it would be really important here. The reason being, there's a couple of things here. First off, loving perception is something that, loving versus arrogant perception and the way that Lugones theorizes it, I think would be a really fantastic academic read of this novel. Because the examples that Lugones gives are about her own mother. So that mother-daughter dichotomy is really a really fruitful place for us to look at being lovingly and kindly perceived versus being arrogantly perceived. And then the other thing in that chapter that I think would be really important and interesting for folks would be the concept of world travel, this intersectional concept where you have your different spheres and worlds, and a world is a world so long as there's somebody living in it. And it's these abstractions. So, you have your world at home, you have your world at work, you have your world at play, you have these intersecting worlds, and you present yourself, act in different ways, speak in different ways in those different worlds. I think those two sort of philosophical ideas would be really provocative to deal with in Girl, Woman, Other. And if you haven't read it, this is I think world travel is probably one of the nearest. We'll probably see a ton of this on the channel. This is probably one of the most significant philosophies of my life, and has really influenced the way that I think about things. Is that concept of world travel and this concept of loving versus arrogant perception. I really think that there's a ton of material that Lugones can really contribute to a discussion of Girl, Woman, Other. In terms of novels that I think would be interesting to you, if it, otherwise, first and foremost, by Tsitsi Dangarembga is Nervous Conditions. Dangarembga is a Zimbabwean author, and wow, what a great novel this is. Let me show this to folks here. Yeah, lots and lots going on here, and what I think is, you see that we've got a Fanon, Wretched of the Earth. So awesome. Yeah, absolutely fantastic stuff. Dangarembga and Nervous Conditions. This is a coming of age novel, and there's so much coming of age stuff in Girl, Woman, Other that I think that you might be interested in this. And the other thing that's really going on in Girl, Woman, Other that really struck me was how many immigrant stories there are and how much migration there is just generally, from being in diaspora to being home and what is home. Um, and, because it's the UK, we can't separate out the colonial project from pretty much anything that's published in the United Kingdom. And Nervous Conditions is a coming of age in the post colonial era novel. I don't know that it gets any better than this. I love Don Garemka's work, and she does a fantastic job here. This is a really, really, really cool novel. And you should read it anyways. But I think if you read Girl, Woman, Other, and you're sort of itching for more of that coming of age stuff and how that intersects with like femininity, post colonialism, and imperialism, and various concepts like that, can't can't do any better than Nervous Conditions. Um, Another one that I think would also be right there, and also is an author who has had some issues with turf ideology, is by Chimamanda Adichie, which is Purple Hibiscus. And I know a lot of Americans read Americana, by Chimamanda Adichie. And Americana is also very good. This is the I think more famous novel in the United States of Chimamanda Adichie's. But I think Purple Hibiscus is probably my preferred novel of hers. Um, and I think just the way that in Purple, yeah, I took notes on the back here. The way that Purple Hibiscus deals with femininity and generations, is really, really good here. And there's a lot of great stuff to delve into in terms of patriarchy and femininity, and how those aspects are interacting. And, Purple Hibiscus is just a great book in general, really, really good. But, Adichie and Evaristo have their complications with their relation to turf ideologies. If that is a game breaker for you, that's a game breaker for you. I'm not going to fault anybody for not reading Roberto Bolaño because of the sexist characterization of women at times in his writing. That's something that you have to decide as a reader. And then another one, and this one is a little obscure, and I don't know if folks are going to be able to find this, in the United States, although I do believe it is available in the United Kingdom, which is by Shida Bazyar, and this one is originally written in German, Drei Kameraden. I liked this novel, about three women in Germany. It Let me show you the nice front page here. This novel, is translated into English, I believe, as Sisters in Arms. So I do believe that this is available in English, but I don't think that this is going to be a novel that is commonly accessible in English. But if you're a German speaker, du kannst Deutsch, Drei Kameraden, yeah, that will get you, right where you want in terms of those intersecting ideas of femininity and how womanhood looks different to different people, how home looks different to different people, and so on. I think, overall, there's a ton of material to dig into here because it's so polyphonic. That's the biggest thing about Girl, Woman, Other that I took away from it, is that there are so many different voices. And this is where, every single chapter having that different perspective. I can see, folks wanting a novel, with a more significant through line, but I wouldn't worry about it here, and that's because things get pretty neatly tied together. You're not sort of left out in the wilderness, like with some novels, and I say that as a novelist myself. In Always the Wanderer, the characters don't ever interact, and it's really abstract how they're separated and how they're connected. Um, but Evaristo does the labor here of connecting, the characters together in a thoughtful way, and folks find their connections, and I think it's a really great way for you to step into, those discussions of that are really complicated about womanhood, about femininity, about the patriarchy, about diaspora, about post-colonial conditions, about class. I think Letitia, Boomy, and Carol, that section, those three back to back, let's just talk about Marxism. Let's talk about class in that particular section in chapter 2. And you could talk at length about that. I think there's a lot to go here. I think that there's a lot to take away from it. If I'm, talking about A Little Life in comparison to this, the biggest thing is that A Little Life and Girl, Woman, Other, A Little Life Much More is just completely ahistorical. And I hesitate to do a video on this because it's so popular, and it's, we'll see. If a bunch of people comment, do a video on it, I'll do a video on it. But the whole idea of, having this narrative be sort of removed from historical context is pretty tough for me to swallow. And fortunately, Evaristo does it. But the biggest thing that really I run into is that there are times when the timeline itself, I don't know a person's age. I don't know when they're coming of age. I don't know what it is. And that Grace chapter all the way at the end is like the only time that I'm really getting a clear vision of that. And maybe the case might be, you need to read more in between the lines and that there's more subtle details, and that's fine. And I accept that as a reader. But there are other signposts that we can put into our writing that can really help us out along the way. That said, I think in terms of a polyphonic novel that has a ton of stuff going on, that is ripe for discussion, that has all sorts of great material in it, this is yours. The Morgan Megan chapter, I think I'm going to leave that to you to decide how you feel about it. I know for me that was not my favorite. I'm not necessarily one to dismiss a work of art, for what it is. In a certain extent, this is a historical document, and it won in 2019, and that's right about when in the UK a lot of that discourse started to really take off. Over the past 5 years, that's been a significant discourse. So definitely something to think about there as well. But yeah, Girl, Woman, Other, Bernadine Evaristo, tons of great stuff here. Overall, I want to show you Drei Kameraden again if you're a German speaker, and then of course Nervous Conditions and Purple Hibiscus, both of which are fantastic. Dangarembga, this, I think to my taste, Dangarembga should be a household name. I think this Nervous Conditions, I think if you're out there reading YA coming of age stories, you need to stop and go read Nervous Conditions by Tsitsi Dangarembga, because wow. This is great, and I should probably reread this and do a story on it. Purple Hibiscus, of course, I recommend as well. And then I cannot recommend Maria Lugones enough. Maria Lugones just does such a fantastic job in Pilgrimages. Really a foundational text for me as a thinker. This one here, tons and tons of stuff going on. Overall, let me know how you think about Girl, Woman, Other down below. I'm very curious to see what everybody's thoughts are, so let me know what you think about that. If you have any questions, thoughts, or ideas, let me know. And as always, if you don't mind, please do read my novel, Always the Wanderer. You have my eternal thanks if you do. And follow me on Instagram at gbk7288. I'll be coming back next week. We'll be talking about The Castle by Franz Kafka. So thank you, everybody, so much for watching today. Hope you have a great day, and I will see you folks later. Bye-bye.